the moon is very connected to money. That's why it's basically saying moon E. And that E is what's called a trident, or what's called a psi. It's a form of how to send energy. That's why energy starts with an E. And if you also notice, if you turn a 3 around, it's also an E. And so what this is about a collaboration. This is about a trinity. This is about more than one particular type of being that we're just calling divided ones that have set themselves up to rule over humanity, and they've already been doing this. And this is what you can see within the currency. What you will see is, one, the direct symbolism of who's doing all this, which goes under the symbol of an 8-pointed star. An 8-pointed star has always been known as the star of Ishtar, which is also where we get our word start. So anytime a person says, I'm going to start something, they also say Ishtar as a name. When a person says that they are looking for a star in the sky, they are actually just saying, I'm looking for Ishtar. And this needs to be people need to be people need to really pay attention to this. Because the reality of all of this becomes is your words are creating things all the time, like we were talking about. They're creating a shape and they're creating light when you say them. So if you don't understand what you're saying, then don't fault everyone else because you've bought and evoked something into your life. The best thing to do is to realize one is doing that, work on your speech, your knowledge, and grab the reins of your chariot, because something else is driving it. Here on this planet, a person has been made to be mentally, spiritually, and physically a slave. And how that works is that spiritually, of course, the religions are set up for a person to go and serve. So they're a slave. Physically, they must go to the job every day and work for this money, even though they don't really want to be there. So they're a slave. Physically. Mentally, our minds are hijacked with loads of junk DNA, or what I call junk information, and thus the mind is mentally in a prison. So what we come to tell you here today is that the resistance, in conjunction with the Wholeness Foundation, is here to free you from that prison. To be able to do that, we must discuss things that have never been discussed before, because obviously if they had been discussed before, then the problem would already be solved. As I was explaining to people, the real power within names are when you're calling on certain names, then if those names are truly powerful and here to help you, then there will be an immediate response. And people need to think about that when they're calling the names that are associated with Christianity, to why other individuals that are doing that from the dark and deepest levels, but still saying those names, are allowed to do that. And it's definitely because those names and those words are related to these energies themselves that are actually in division, meaning that they're attempting to cause mankind and the animals and many other beings to continuously war with one another. People should understand that even the J on the word Jesus, a J is a hook, and that's why they call them fishers of men. When a person that is fishing for men is really fishing for souls, because the word men is simply the Egyptian god of fertility. And once that fertilization begins to happen, it comes into the symbolism of a snake or a fish, because there's not too big of a difference, as they both have scales. So people need to understand that once the human being becomes divided or crossed, then they lose a great deal of their power, and their reincarnation is generally as some type of animal. If they get crossed again, then their next life is as something of an insect. If they get crossed again, then their next life is something like a tree. And so as we talked about, the Knights of Malta told the Catholics, you may have the cross, but we have the true meaning to the cross, because they understood what you'll see here on the currency, which is the use of the double cross, which is the symbol or the mark of Cain. It's known that in the Old Testament that Cain was given a mark to roam throughout the land so that he could not be conquered by his father, that mark was given to him by his father, which we now know to be part of the serpent god faction. And it's very important here to realize that to say that all serpents are evil is just as silly as saying that all humans are good, because there is a large part of the human being, as they call it, the Homo sapien, and sapien means serpent, or the reptilian portion of the brain, which is actually a hack into the brain, changing the consciousness of the brain, that there's definitely been some involvement with some type of hyperdimensional beings. However, human being is exactly that. They are hyperdimensional. And when I saw my hyperdimensional self, I saw that my mind and my heart was controlling which dimension I was in. And that because this one had been thought about and I had been binded to it so much, then it became a problem for me to realize that I was hyperdimensional. And how this binding takes place is very close to with trees and ropes and ties. If you notice that on just about every single city or country or state or continent's currency, you will at times find a tree associated with it. Not just the tree that it's written on, but also maybe a state or county seal of a tree. And also when reading into the deeper Masonic encyclopedias, we find that every single degree is associated with a different tree. And this is because of an ancient secret that few will lend you time to tell, but it is about the association between snakes and trees. That somewhere in the evolution, or whatever you want to call it, of this grand creation, snakes end up being trees or trees end up being snakes. And what you're actually looking at with the branches is the tentacles. In fact, there are many different beings that seem to exist one or two levels below us that actually, they have no face. They use the tentacle to feel about and feel things. And so this relationship is also what they're attempting to capture in Genesis, although they're not alluding to you what exactly is going on, but they talk about Eve and this tree being somehow joined together in the beginning of the fall of mankind, as they're calling it, which is actually a staged plan, not something that mankind is doing on his own, but a way in which to cause us to fall. And you will see that here with the currency, that there's a perpetrator that is attempting to link us all in with it as we continue just to try to survive. And this happens with money. So there are generally two serpents shown on the pole, which gives us the caudacious rod. It's important to identify what those two serpents are, and there's been a lot of debate here these days in trying to discover what exactly these two serpents are about. Many have alluded that this is kundilini, that kundilini should rise from the base of the spine into the brain, and then that activates a person. And I found that this may not be entirely true, that it's more like that there is an energy that rests in the head, and it must come down, or what they call descend like a dove, from the head into the center solar plexus or heart area, while there is another energy that must come from below, and it must go all the way up and then meet at the same place. So these two must meet in the middle. It's not that one goes to the other. And when those two meet, then it causes an activation of kundalini, thus ruling out the caudacious staff as an actual symbol of kundalini, save that it's an individual who has the two serpents risen into their brain, thus controlling their thought and everything that they're about. And we find that this may be true because when looking at a great deal of the Egyptian symbolism and the symbolism from many other tribes, such as the Indonesian, those that understand the Naga or worship the Naga, etc., that they keep these serpents on the crown of on the top of their crowns, symbolizing that it's simply remaining in their mind and in their head, not cycling. So it's important to pull apart some of this symbolism and exactly what it means. In addition to that, if we notice with the dollar sign, which is actually your number 4 on your computer keyboard, you will notice that there is only one stick going through it. And this has been changed from the original 2 sticks going through it. And this is because there was always knowledge that one of those serpents were poisonous, as we talked about on the previous show. And that one of those serpents wasn't as harmful as the other, but again, you're still dealing with serpentine energy, and there's a great deal of power and a great deal of responsibility that comes with such things, and we have now more recordings of individuals that have failed with it than individuals that have actually progressed with it. But this is, I guess, maybe a work in progress itself for humanity to when they will stop falling under the same tricks and spells. Because what's happening is that when they show that one serpent or one stick, they're showing that is, or the one S around the stick, that is simply showing that they're using the poisonous one. And so that becomes the tune of money, is that whoever is choosing to put it out is not putting anything at all and has no interest in doing that. And so to recap, the 8-pointed star is of Ishtar. The word Ishtar can just be looked at as I-S-H-T-A-R, but that I-S is where you get your dollar sign from. Ishtar is also Ashtar and many other names, but mainly known as Isis. And if everyone pretty much knows at this point that's in the occult circle, that when you compress the name Isis into one symbol, it makes a dollar sign. So this shows you further that a great deal of these 8-pointed stars that you're seeing and this connection to Isis is alive and on deck. And so I'm going to read an excerpt here that gives you more of a clarity on why the kings and the queens and things of this nature, tribal leaders, etc., of this world became intrigued by this being, and ultimately it's causing the demise of our world. So, of course, in identifying it, that would actually reverse the cycle and allow people to regroup. So I'm pulling up one particular excerpt, and I'll have Pablo pull that up on the screen also on live stream for those that have not tuned into that. It's www.livestream.com/entertainment. And he's going to pull up an excerpt called The Origins of Ishtar, and I will read it very briefly here. And it says, on the one hand, therefore, Ishtar was depicted as a heraldal, naked goddess, and on the other as heroine and queen. The goddess is the spouse and lover of the king, and whom she participates in the ritual of a sacred marriage. She provides the king with economic blessings, as well as power and victory in war. Inanna Ishtar is associated with the cults of many cities. She is particularly prominent in Uruk, Akkad, Kish, Nineveh, and Arabella. In Uruk, but particularly in Akkad and Assyria, she is a goddess of war and victory. In Mesopotamian literary texts, Inanna Ishtar has a coherent and believable, if complex, personality. Inanna Ishtar is a young, independent, and willful woman of the urban class. She is a product of an urban world and is closely associated with cities more than with cosmic functions. Now, I want to stop here because I just keep seeing Beyonce. The idea of a very independent, upper-class woman, but how that woman is nowhere near connected to what the earth and what the earth is all about, because she's not connected to the cosmic functions, but more of just the functions that take place within cities. So, I continue to read. It says, she seems to be constantly on the move, perhaps because of her association with heavenly bodies and unencumbered women. And what this means is that many in the heavens have taken Ishtar ideas and Inanna-type ideas and made them a part of their own, and then that also would make them restless and discontent. And thus her character also. And as it continues, it says here, Inanna Ishtar often appears as a sexually attractive being, but she remains unsatisfied and is constantly injured, striving and contentious. She tends toward anger and rage and troubles heaven and earth. One is tempted to talk of early psychic wounds. So regardless of how much the world wants to remain in denial,